Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 127. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Sunday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, just like that, the 2025 NFL Draft is in the books, rounds 4 through 7. The UDFAs signing yesterday. Pittsburgh's draft class is complete, and so we can finally have a long look at the selections Pittsburgh made. There were 7 selections this year. One trade down got Pittsburgh an additional picks. They do finish with 7 after going into the draft with 6. So, Dave, we made it. We want to thank everyone from the site who did a great job all weekend, the great preparation that we had scouting reports on 6 of the 7 picks and 4 of the 7 undrafted free agent signings. Want to thank everyone who followed the site throughout draft season and, of course, during draft week, and really successful year. So, Dave, thanks for being here. How you doing?
Happy Sunday to you. And we'll obviously have probably follow this up with another podcast on Monday, but we have a lot to recap today. Today, the final 3 picks, the kind of the overview of the whole draft, along with the undrafted free agents. And yeah, thank you to everybody who visited the site and listened to the podcast. And thank you to our fine crew. Man, I learned so much from a lot of those profiles throughout draft season. And it's just, I couldn't help but think last night, man, you know, we end the regular season in what, January or so, and then we're following that up by getting into the comments that Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin make after the season. So there's a lot of work to kind of wrap up all that, start getting ready for the off season and free agency and all like that. Then, you know, the Senior Bowl's here before we know it, and you start finally cracking into some of these draft prospects, and you know so little about some of these guys, you know, other than maybe the main stars, the main names. And it just amazes me that you go from what is it, about February, the time the Senior Bowl gets underway, to the end of April, and then you feel it's amazing how much you can learn in such a short bit of time. But then once the draft gets underway and some of these prospects start rolling off the board, you start kicking yourself, man, I wish I would have watched more on that guy. Yeah, there's never enough time, you know, and there's never enough tape. And that's where some of these draft profiles come in, with people dividing and conquering, and at least gives you a little bit a better head start, be able to talk a little bit about these guys. But just, you know, very, very happy with how, you know, things went on our end with the site, and got to really enjoy the draft this year. And yeah, we got a lot to talk about here today, I guess, starting with the day 3 picks.
It's 8 pounds in a 5-pound bag, as Mike Tomlin says. We probably get a good 7 pounds in there, but yeah, appreciate the support and everyone who commented and said nice things and just came to the site and read about who the Pittsburgh Steelers' newest rookies are. And Dave, let's dive on in the 4th round with the team's first selection on day 3. The Pittsburgh Steelers selecting Jack Sawyer, edge rusher out of Ohio State, to play outside linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We had discussed a little bit on the pre-show before the picks came in on Saturday that Pittsburgh might explore outside linebacker, threw out a couple different names. Sawyer's a name we did not talk about too much during the pre-draft process, but was part of that great Ohio State national title defense, and a guy that just seemed to always make the big play whenever the Buckeyes needed one.
Yeah, I kind of thought if they would. I did not mock a edge to the Steelers in my mock draft this year. I was obviously open to it. Had, you know, maybe had they picked up another pick earlier in the draft or something like that. But look, they had brought in a couple of guys that for pre-draft visits. I don't think Sawyer was one of those that they brought in. I wasn't expecting an edge, you know, in to start off day 3 there overall, but So I will say that's a surprise. I did think that if they drafted an edge, it might be a little bit later in day 3, but they did indeed draft him. You get a 4-year senior coming out of Ohio State, 6'2" or 6'4", 2'8", 260 pounds, a little bit of a different build than say a Nick Herbig. Overall, kind of a different player overall. Now, you look at what he put up statistically over the course of the last 2 seasons at Ohio State. 19 total tackles for loss, had 15 and a half sacks. I have not gone back and watched those sacks. So I want to get a good sense of the quality of those sacks. Did have 5 forced fumbles over the course of the last 2 years, and I believe 9 passes defensed and even an interception. This was, I believe, a team captain for Ohio State, a very, very high energy guy. And to hear the Steelers talk about him after the selection, I think more, even though he put up good pass rush stats and all like that, it just feels like a guy that they want potentially to work into the rotation in maybe some run defending type situations, and then obviously the type physicality player that he is, and where his spot's likely to be on the depth chart. You're probably talking about a core special teams player on top of everything else here. So a little bit shocked about not so much, I guess, the player, but them going the position that they did there.
I understand that instinct, and I had that initial thought as well. But for Pittsburgh, it is so important to be stocked at outside linebacker. It is the engine of the defense. It's what makes the unit go. I've said that time and time again. In Pittsburgh, I think to Omar Khan's immense credit, has really had the desire to be strong at outside linebacker, top to bottom, whether it's drafting Nick Herbig a couple years ago, also in the 4th round, whether that's acquiring Preston Smith at the deadline last year to have depth. This is a team that had injuries to the position early last year, losing Alex Highsmith, losing Herbig as well. You had to get some guys from the outside. When Pittsburgh can't have a good pass rush, the whole defense, the whole theory of how Pittsburgh wins, in addition to playing good run defense, really falls apart. So you want to have really strong depth, top to bottom, never have a question if we lose a guy, are we going to have a good backup rotation? Are we going to have to rely on a guy that's not in position to play and give us quality snaps off the edge? And so I understand the instinct there to fortify the trenches and be able to just have that consistent source of next man up at outside linebacker. With Sawyer, just watching the tape, I was getting into his tape more last night, Dave. I just kept writing around the ball playmaker when they needed to play. This is a guy who made one. No nonsense pass rusher, great power in his hands, strong at the point of attack. There's a limited upside to him. The bend isn't there. The overall athleticism isn't impressive. He didn't test, and so we can't capture that metrically, objectively. But maybe there's a reason why he didn't test, because I don't know if it would have been fantastic numbers overall. But you see a guy that is just steady playmaker and just kind of knows how to rush the passer, and that's impressive.
I just DM'd you over there every year, every Sunday right after the draft ends. We do our annual redraft exercise. It winds up being pretty entertaining. Overall, we've had a lot of success with that. What we do is we color code in between the Steelers selections, and yeah, it's a little bit lazy way of looking at it, because you never know exactly who's going to be left on the board where, and how changing one pick for any team might change the complexion of things overall. But it's all we have to work with as a whole, and at least it gives you kind of a sense of where teams around the league had players, I guess, ranked overall globally. Once again, it is a little bit of a lazy type way of looking at this. But when you do look at pick 123 in the 4th round, where the Steelers chose Jack Sawyer, all the way up until, what was it, 163, which would have been in the 5th round, right before the Steelers took Yahya Black at 164 there. If you look at that large group of players there and you say, okay, let's assume the board broke the same, basically the same way there, and you did not take Jack Sawyer there, and you still try to put in a player within that group that maybe fits what the Steelers, taking obviously into account the picks that you have made up until that point, taking into account that no trades or anything like that are going to be part of this, taking into account what the Steelers need moving forward, the kind of interest, the kind of player that they look for moving forward. Who else on that list of players that I just sent to you? How many players in total is that?
40, roughly.
Yeah, roughly 40. Who within that group of players could have potentially been the selection other than Sawyer?
You're asking who I personally would have chosen or who I think Pittsburgh would have chosen had, say, Sawyer been off the board?
I guess both.
Well, from my standpoint, I was looking at Manor from Stanford, and I wonder if he fell because of some of the medical potential concerns on him. I know receiver was not a big need, but I just like the talent. I thought that would have been great day 3 value. There's a guy like Teddy Buchanan from Cal, who was one of my guys, Malachi Moore from Alabama, who went a few picks later. So would that have been my personal pick? It's hard to say to kind of answer that big type of question, but I just focus on I just try to focus on the guy that they got, and I can certainly see the rationale for why they took him.
Yeah, the only thing that kind of stuck out to me, other than maybe Aya Menora, the wide receiver out of Stanford, would what if you took maybe you got your defensive tackle around earlier there in Joshua Farmer, and then went something other than Yahya Black, in the next round. I don't know, maybe a Torrey Horton or
Or got your
something.
pass rusher in the 5th round.
Yeah. But the thing is by then a couple of the guys that had the edge rushers that they had already brought in for visits were off the board there by that time, because that even that Baron Sorrell, who I really liked out of Texas, went one pick after Jack Sawyer did. And then I think in the earlier round before Sawyer came off the board, I believe who was the other edge that the Steelers brought in that went off the board?
Elijah Roberts went in the
Yeah.
5th round, a couple picks ahead.
Okay, there you go. So I guess if you look at it that way, yeah, Elijah Roberts went that same round as Sawyer, or that same group of players, I guess. So if you did take Sawyer there and you were still going to pick an edge, maybe you go Elijah Roberts there, but they went pedigree with Jack Sawyer in that spot. I just wanted to throw that out real quick there, that I think you need to take that into account, kind of the way the board broke. And this probably seemed more best player that they liked on the board more so than positional, right?
But I also think Pittsburgh wants to have really good edge depth, because you don't want to get caught with your pants down where you have injuries, and Pittsburgh's experienced that when they've lost TJ Watt in the past, or last year, like I said, with Herbig and Highsmith. You have to be deep at outside linebacker. It is the core tenet of your defense. And so we know in some of those Kevin Colbert years, I think even the first Omar Khan year, maybe if my timeline's correct, they were a little thin. You had guys like Malik Reed and the depth wasn't good, and they tried to rely on guys like Taco Charlton and Derek Tuska, and it just not going to work when you don't have that really strong depth top to bottom. Now, Jeremiah Moon returns, but he is, to me, a really underdeveloped outside linebacker. Can be a quality special teamer, but still has a long ways to go. I know Sawyer's completely new and unproven, and we'll see, but he seems to be a lot more refined than where Jeremiah Moon's at, who's kind of that lump of clay that probably is never going to be a real big pass rusher. At best, maybe a good run defender because of his size and his length. And so I understand the point of you have Watt and Highsmith and Herbig and Moon and Sawyer, and we'll see whoever else emerges. Usually somebody comes alive in training camp. And so it's just, that's one position you have to be deep at, and Pittsburgh is.
And you look back to last year, how many games did Highsmith miss? How many games did Herbig miss? Watt was banged up a little bit there. And I remember a couple years ago us getting on this team saying, where's that other outside linebacker at? You know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I understand the depth here overall, and I think you hit on the key thing there with Sawyer when we first started talking about him here is, he's around the ball a lot. He's made a lot of plays. Probably from a RAS athletic kind of look at him, not probably not going to jump out a lot there. The only thing I went and watched last night, I believe, was the cut ups of Sawyer against Oregon and I didn't really get a good feel for him there. So once again, before I talk more about in depth on him, I need to watch a full 3 games of him.
Yeah, I went to the Iowa and Texas games last night, and obviously the Texas game had that big strip sack, fumble return for a touchdown, 80 something yards in the fourth quarter, that one that sealed the win. And so that's kind of the playmaking and clutch moments that Jack Sawyer was known for. A very colorful stat line last year at Ohio State: 59 tackles, 9 for a loss, 9 sacks, a pick, 7 pass deflections, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 fumble recoveries for a touchdown, including that Texas one, 3 forced fumbles. I mean, it's just all over the place. He was making plays in every facet of the game, dropping the coverage a little bit. Again, I don't see the tools aren't there. The upside's not going to be immense. I think probably number 3, outside linebacker, really good run defender, rotational outside guy that's always around the ball. He's violent, he's physical, he's tough. He plays with good hand use, there's power on his punch. You see him with a bull rush that's effective, a little tight around the corners, had success with swipes against Cam Williams from Texas, who I didn't think was a great pass protector in general. He kind of took advantage of some of those slower footed guys, but I just see a guy that's smart, easy to project. He played with his hand up. He played in that Ohio State defense. I just feel like Pittsburgh had a lot of easy projections in this one, at least relative to a draft pick. Nothing's guaranteed, but you take a guy like Derek Carmen, who played in a pretty pro style defense at Oregon, going to do similar things in Pittsburgh. Caleb Johnson played in a offense at Iowa that mimics what Pittsburgh's offense is in the NFL. Same with Jack Sawyer, Will Howard coming from a offense that asked more of him than a lot of college quarterbacks. And so I just think Pittsburgh took a lot of clean, easy projections, and Jack Sawyer is one of them.
All right, Terrell Austin, I believe, is the one that talked the most about him, along with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan, and they talked about how he'll eventually be kind of a both sides kind of guy, I think. But looking back, at least in the small cut ups that I saw from last season, at least from the Oregon game, I think he was primarily a left on the left side there. How much did you see him in what you've watched on the right side?
I can pull up his numbers right now to get some concrete data, but he was primarily a left outside linebacker. The other teammate that got drafted earlier, JT, was on the other side of the formation there. So yeah, that's going to be more, where TJ Watt plays is where Sawyer's been at. But obviously, as a backup, he's going to have to play both, and he did play both. I saw some snaps on the right side. I'll pull up his numbers right now if I can get a handle on that. Last year, 409 at what PFF's calling the Leo position, 206 at left outside linebacker. Looks like 42 at right end, 12 right outside linebackers. So again, primarily left side guy, but he's gonna have to learn both.
Okay. All right. So that's one thing that stuck out. We'll want to probably differentiate and try to, as we get deeper into him, see how he did from the right side versus the left side. At least he has experience in that. I did see him on his feet some. I did see him with the hand in the ground. Saw him drop a couple of times into coverage. One of them, he tripped over an opponent's feet. They got tangled up and he went down that way. But once again, that was just the Oregon game as he was dropping into coverage in that game there. But and you agree this is a guy that should show up on special teams, right?
Yeah, you're gonna have to as a backup outside linebacker. So I think he'll hold his own there. And yeah, looking at 2023, still primarily left side guy, but played 150 or so snaps on the right side. So probably more of a background doing that 2 years ago than last year.
All right, definitely high energy guy. And you look at some of the pre-game clips with him, with rallying the troops, him right in the center of the groups of players, getting them fired up. So I don't think you're going to have any issue there. Once again, was a team captain, so You get some leadership there, a little bit older guy experience. You're not going to have any problem with him, I don't think, from a character. He's probably not a guy that you have to tell him how to do something twice, right?
Right, hearts and smarts, and they called him Captain Jack for a reason, as you said, literally captain of that national title winning Ohio State defense. And so understanding the selection, I don't think the upside is immense here, but I think there's a good floor. And I think you kind of know what you're going to get with this guy pretty clearly.
All right.
All right, let's go. Fifth round, Pittsburgh making the trade down. They traded out a 155 to move down to 164 in a deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Picked up a seventh round pick, number 226 overall. That was the lone trade that Omar Khan and the Pittsburgh Steelers made during this draft. So move down a handful of spots and pick up an additional selection. And with that move down, Pittsburgh at 164 overall, taking Yahya Black, the defensive lineman out of Iowa. And I'll put my hand up. I called him Yahya a lot probably during this process, just reading it off the page. And it is Yahya Black from Iowa. Big defensive lineman. Pittsburgh's calling him really a do-it-all defensive lineman, maybe even more defensive end than nose tackle, despite his listing at 6'5", 330. Carl Dunbar spoke about the pick afterwards and seemed pretty committed to keep Keanu Benton at nose tackle and really saw Black as more for technique with his length and those long 35-inch arms. So what are your thoughts on Yahya Black as that second double-dip defensive lineman?
Was it well? We didn't know whether or not this team would double dip in this draft at defensive line. I was hopeful that they would. I wasn't sure that they would, so I'm glad that they did. Overall, is it YA or YA?
According to Dane Brugler's draft guide, it says Y, the word Y, and then dash yay, YAY.
Okay. YA Black. Long. You get a guy in the middle of the defense there. I kind of wondered if they might view him more as a nose tackle type, but to hear, I guess, Austin and Dunbar talk that they don't necessarily, they think he's a guy that can play up and down the line overall and not necessarily be a nose tackle type. And then kind of on the extended thoughts on that, they seem very comfortable with keeping Keanu Benton more inside as a nose. So specifically, this is not a guy to I don't think pigeonhole as a nose tackle. I mean, I think overall when you look at him, you got to like those long arms, right? And his play specifically, I think, against the run overall. Heck, you got a guy. 35-inch arms with him, big old hands at 10 3/8 inches, massive human, at least initial measurement 6'5" and 6 3/4, 336 pounds. Little bit older guy at 23 years of age, played multiple games, 54 game appearances in college, 27 starts, 14 TFLs, just 5.5 sacks. I think more of a run defender than he is a guy that's going to get after the pass.
Yeah, that was my interpretation of him. He's certainly a big guy. He's long, and so I understand kind of the appeal to play defensive end. I didn't see the further he gets out from center, Dave. I just think there's going to be some issues in terms of lateral quickness and overall foot speed. He's a guy that is a rundown guy, really a two down type of a guy, and not going to offer a ton as a pass rusher. And then I think even the run defense is hit and miss. He can play a little tall. There were some balance and coordination issues, staying on his feet. When it's good, it's good. There are some really good reps and two gapping and stacking and shedding, and certainly he can eat blocks, against those base blocks because of his size, because of his strength. But I just felt like not a lot of pass rush value, inconsistent run defense. You kind of wonder, okay, what's the plan? What's the home, the role for Yahya Black?
Yeah, you do kind of wonder, especially in sub-package situations. Probably not going to see a lot of them there, especially in obvious passing down situations.
Yeah, he certainly profiles as a base defensive end, an Okie front type of a guy in Pittsburgh's 3-4, which is not used a ton. About a quarter of the time last season saw a real good decrease from 2023 to 2024. Very, very heavy in sub package last year for Pittsburgh. So those are kind of our notes from our Jonathan Heitritter, who wrote the report on him. I had pretty similar thoughts. He can flash two gapping. I'm just trying to read some of my poorly written notes here. just being able to play in space, find a pass rush plan. He's almost 6'6", and so leverage is an issue in the run game. I get the thought here of trying to really, obviously Pittsburgh's intent here was to improve their front seven, get better against the run, get stronger, get tougher, get more physical after allowing 299 and Pittsburgh just really wilting and not being dominant in the trenches at any point during that losing streak, and really all came to a head in that terrible Baltimore wildcard loss. So I do understand Pittsburgh wanting to throw everything they can at improving their defensive line, adding competition to really have the best group possible. I just wonder on Yahya Black. The upside certainly I think is minimal, and I think even what he does well, which is run defense, has been too spotty for a guy that's older, his experience. I just didn't think he was as refined as he should be for a guy at this stage of his career.
All right, I've watched a little bit more of him than Jack Sawyer, so I want to dive deeper into him as well too. But this team has thrown a lot of mud, if you will, at the defensive line wall. Some of it not as high quality mud, and some of the mud that was already there. Look, they re-signed Loudermilk. They signed Quale, and that was a 2-year deal that makes you kind of think that he's going to stick around. You have last year's class with Logan Lee. Prior to that class, you have DeMarvin Leal. You re-signed Loudermilk. You got Montravius Adams still there. Dean Lowry might as well hope Dean Lowry's got a lease he can get out of. You got a lot of guys there, and now you throw in Yahya Black into there, and it does, how does it all come together with the six?
Yeah, that does kind of what it feels like.
And then obviously you got Derek Harmon, who's going to be part of that. You got Benton. You got who three of them are going to be at least, right? You got Harmon, you got Cam Hayward, you got Keanu Benton, and then you kind of what's the other three going to look like?
And I do understand the value of adding competition and letting these guys truly fight it out in training camp, so you bring the best to your 53-man roster come September. But it does feel a little, like you said, mud at the wall, throw a lot of pieces at it, and just kind of hope that it something emerges from it, the cream rises to the top. So I know I sound like I'm probably killing the guy. I understand it's a 5th-round pick. All these guys are going to have some flaws, and there are some impressive reps on tape with Black. You see a guy that can control the point of attack, can get off blocks. You see some good level reps. He runs to the football. I like his effort, and that's always important in Pittsburgh. As well, he's got a block kick on his resume, and that's also good value. Look at a guy that's 6'6" with 35-inch arms. Maybe he gets up in an A gap and gets his hand up and blocks a kick at some point. Wouldn't be shocking if he did, even in the preseason, to kind of show some additional value there. Even Dean Lowry had some value doing that last year against the Jets, despite his overall quiet season. So I do get the intent, and Pittsburgh's mission was clear. I wrote about that this morning. They want to get this run defense better, which they need to. I just wonder if Black's refined enough to really give him that.
What did you think about Quale's fit? And then who was the other one that they added?
Oto Mewa.
Right. Okay. Where do you see Quale fit in this?
Well, he was also a base end, which is why with Black, like I really, that's why I thought he was a nose tackle initially based on his size profile and also what Pittsburgh needs. I mean, he did play up and down. He did play some 3-tech and 4-tech, so it's not foreign to him, but it just felt like the further he got out from center, the more issues there were on tape. And I felt like nose tackle might be the best way to maybe compete behind Keanu Benton for that second job with Montravius Adams, who's a different body type, a much better athlete, burstier player than Yahya Black. So yeah, Quale, I like the fit. It's a base end type of role. He's a really good run defender, but he was really steady there. Another guy that's not going to offer much as a pass rusher. So you have a lot of base rundown guys in Quale, in Loudermilk, and now in Yahya Black. And, how many of those guys stick, we'll have to wait and see.
If you, barring injury and all right now, would you include Quale as a strong chance of being part of the 6? I mean, I suppose there's nothing that says they can't keep 7 in total, but it would be a little, I don't know. Well,
They did that once before recently, I think. Although I don't know if that was with Logan Lee. No, because Lee got put on IR. Logan Lee did not get put on IR immediately last year, did he? It was Moon.
No, Lee, I think Lee didn't he? Didn't he have to wait until wasn't that part of the settling of the 53?
I'm just trying to think, who were the two guys they put on IR immediately on cutdowns last year that didn't have
Was
to
it
wait? It was
Moon? Was
Moon.
one of them, and
I don't
was
remember
it
the
the
other.
tackle? Was it Cook?
Might have been Dylan Cook. I think you're right about that. So I think Lee ended up going on IR late, like a couple days after the roster got settled. So they might have
Okay.
kept all that's to say they might have kept 7 initially last year. They have gone heavier before. To answer your question, to get back to a more pertinent point, yeah, I think Aquale has a good chance. I would call him inside the bubble right now.
All right. So, what does this mean for guys like Lowry? Lowry's going to be easy to X out of this, right?
Sure. Another guy we don't talk about too much is DeMarvin Leal. I know he's hybrid D end outside linebacker, but he's also coming back. And so where does he fit in this whole thing? So again, it kind of goes to that just a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, as you said, mud at the wall and see what sticks. Like I understand the value in that, but it does feel a little just throw a bunch at it and a little less of a focus vision and more of a broad base. Let's get a lot of people in there and just see how it shakes out.
And here's the thing too, going back to our exercise and all, if you look at that small groups of group of players, but between Yahya Black and when Will Howard was taken in the 6th round, there's not a lot of players to choose from if you were to, do this lazy exercise. What other way would you have gone? Maybe a defensive back in that situation. I mean, a lot of corners came off. Za Frazier, Jordan Hancock, who was a corner / safety. That you're just going to get a fringe roster player in him if you went that way. I suppose Jackson Hawes, the tight end, was on the board at that time. Outs. I mean, you would have had to probably go a different position altogether if you didn't go Yahya Black there. I suppose
Yeah.
Horton was still on the board. You could pick up a wide receiver there. But what I'm getting at there is, was this more of a value kind of one of our guys kind of pick again, almost in the same breath that Jack Sawyer was? This is how the board's shaken out. These are guys that we like. Did that play a part in the selection?
I think what drove the bus on the selection was Pittsburgh came into the draft saying we got to get better up front. In the way that Pittsburgh dedicated a lot of draft capital to the trenches offensively in Omar Khan's first 2 drafts, especially last year with 3 offensive linemen in the first, 5 selections of Fautanu and Frazier and McCormick. You're seeing kind of the same investments defensively. And I do understand the vision and I appreciate that. I just try to focus on the player itself and what kind of player is Pittsburgh getting. And I understand what they're seeing, and they brought him in for a visit, and it's rare size, and the run defense can be very good. If he can be a more consistent run defender, there is going to be a home for him. If he can play more 3 tech and 1 tech and shade, and be more consistent against the run, stay on his feet, keep his pads down, be a little more refined, and there's certainly going to be a home for Yahya Black. But you still see that up and down run defense tape. Well, zone schemes give him some problems. He's not completely unathletic, but the foot speed's not going to be great, and there are just some overall balance issues on the move. So if he was a younger guy, more developmental, you sit there and say, well, maybe he has to just work on technique and kind of come into his own. This is a guy that will play 5 years at Iowa, 23 years old, probably closer to his ceiling. And so you just kind of wonder, okay, well, we don't have a lot of pass rush here. The run defense can be up and down. What are we exactly going to get from him? But Pittsburgh's mission was to really load up on front 7, on Derek Harmon, on Jack Sawyer, on Yahya Black, and that's the theory of what Pittsburgh's doing here.
All right, the 4th round pick on Jack Sawyer, he should make the 53-man roster, right?
It's rare for 4th rounders to not make it. I mean, I always mention Fred Gibson as one. Who else didn't? Duran Grant, I think, initially missed the 53. Maybe Danny Farmer way back when, but that's my nostalgia kick. So Sawyer's going to make it.
All right, I agree. What about Yahya Black? What's the chance you get into that 5th round range there? There's a chance that he might, it's all going to be up to him. He's not as guaranteed as a Sawyer.
No, I think it's a pretty big drop off where Black is real. As you said, it's up to him. It's based on the competition in that room. There's a lot of people competing for spots. How does Leal look? Aquale, Otomewa, Loudermilk. I assume Lowry won't even make it to training camp, but if he's around, he'll still be in the mix as a veteran. So Yeah, I mean, it's really going to be kind of a, take the best couple of backups based on who plays well this summer.
All right, I look forward to diving in deeper in him, possibly even by tomorrow morning.
All right, Dave, in round number 6, Pittsburgh, after all the speculation about quarterback, and are they going to take Shedeur Sanders, who ultimately goes to the AFC North in Cleveland, but not Pittsburgh. The Steelers take Will Howard at pick 185, the quarterback out of Ohio State. And I'm not rewriting history here. I'm not reacting after the pick in the sense when I say, Dave, big fan of this pick. I was a big fan of Will Howard. I've talked about him a lot throughout this pre-draft process. My number 3 quarterback in this class. I generally am out on taking the 6th-round quarterback because it often doesn't produce a whole lot of results for you, but I'm really happy about this pick.
Yeah, and this did just happen with you overnight either. When did you release the video of things that you like about Will Howard? When was that?
That was at least a month ago, if not longer.
Okay. First and foremost, let's get this out there and out of the way. This team had no intentions on drafting Shedeur Sanders, right?
It sure does not seem so.
So everybody kept, especially the major media, getting all up in arms and saying, well, they had the conversations here in the first round with Harmon and going into the 3rd round. Well, Sanders still on the board. You have to think this is a landing spot for. They didn't have any interest in Shedeur Sanders, I don't think. I mean, I suppose maybe if he falls into that 6th round spot where they took Howard, maybe they have the conversations, but I'm not even convinced if they had their druthers between Sanders and Will Howard, I'm not convinced that they take Shedeur Sanders there, to be quite honest with you. I think that was a whole bunch of poppycock.
That's a word for you.
Yeah, when it comes to that. And I circle back to put my tinfoil hat on and talking about Mike Tomlin not ever seeing Shedeur Sanders throw, and I feel like I've been kind of justified when it comes to that. I just don't think they had any interest in whatsoever in Shedeur Sanders, regardless of what the media said about him. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. About the player, I ended up mocking Will Howard a couple of rounds earlier, obviously, to the Steelers, and the more I watched of him after going back and watching some of your stuff and looking at the quarterback class as a whole and thinking that the Steelers might potentially take one at some point in here. Yeah, I became a fan. I watched some of that Kansas State stuff of his after the fact, after watching, the initial stuff from the Ohio State tape. There's something at least to work with here, I believe. We talked about, I think, pre-draft about the ability, the deep ball accuracy, the deep ball completion rate, him being a distributor of football. We addressed some of the pushbacks of, well, look at the talent that he had around him. Well, somebody still got to make these throws, and not all these throws were wide open guys. I thought he was smart. I thought he and the Steelers pointed this out as well too. You look at the struggles that he went through initially in last season, and look, this is a guy that transferred, probably didn't have had to continue to learn the offense going into last season. Obviously had his struggles, but in crunch time and when it mattered and against good teams, when they really needed him in the big games, he showed up, and I think that's part of the process here that really endeared them to him. That in big moments, in big games, he bounced back from not a great start to the season, and I think they still see a little bit of an upside with this guy overall. I think Arthur Smith talked about just some of the tools that he has. And, I think if you look overall with his ability to roll out, the mobility aspect, that he's not the most uber athletic guy, but I mean, he's he's got some nice scrambles and athleticism and gains on tape when it comes to that. I think as the season went on, he got a little bit away from the more stupid decisions with the football. And we're talking about a 6th-round pick here. And you give yourself a quarterback on the roster for the next couple of seasons that, at worst, has a very strong chance to be your backup guy moving forward. And, your plan obviously isn't to play him his rookie season. You want to try to develop him throughout the rest of this summer and training camp and the preseason. And let's see what happens. Maybe you get a guy that can legitimately compete to be a starter for this team starting in 2026.
Yeah, I know it's a 6th-round pick, and those guys usually don't amount to a whole lot. I know that Tom Brady's name will get mentioned here. I'm not calling Will Howard Tom Brady, obviously, but I think there's potential for Howard to be a whole lot more than your typical 6th-round return at quarterback. This is a guy that I put a 2nd-round grade on personally. Maybe I'll be wrong about that. Who knows? But we talk so much, Dave, about scrambling and out of structure and making the crazy off-platform play, and those things are important. All the elite quarterbacks can do that, and that's not going to be Will Howard's game necessarily, but so much of the game is still from within the pocket, and I think often NFL, globally, we lose sight of that, and Howard can play from the pocket. He's accurate, he's smart, his touch on the football is impressive. You just watch him drop the ball in the bucket time and time again to all levels of the field at Ohio State last year. And even at Kansas State, you saw those similar traits and attributes show up. I mentioned the Texas game he played and his last year at K-State, that crazy comeback that he had there. So really smart guy on and off the field. He was recruited by every Ivy League school from Harvard to Princeton to Yale to Columbia, 1300 SAT, 4.3 something weighted GPA in high school. So you have the intelligence to play the quarterback position. And, I just thought he played his best football down the stretch. That's what Arthur Smith talked about. It was a tougher start to the year, had that bad Michigan game. But, when you transfer in to a new system at Ohio State, going to be some bumps in the road. It's not going to all be perfect. You're going to have to pick up your system. You're trying to do that on the fly 1 year, get acclimated, assert yourself as a leader. It's not all going to be perfect, but it really got good at the end of the season. You watched the Oregon game against the playoffs or in the playoffs. They just came out firing. Ohio State did. Howard was fantastic. And so you just see a guy that I think can lead, can read a defense, is accurate, can place the football well, and I still value accuracy so highly for any quarterback. It's still one of the most important traits to have at the position. I think Howard is an accurate quarterback overall, and played in an offense that asked a good amount of him at Kansas State and at Ohio State. They had a cadence in college. Go back and watch that Gruden quarterback camp with Jackson Dart, who was a 1st-round pick. Their cadence was a clap, and their dummy count was 2 claps, and that's how they ran the offense at Ole Miss. Howard had to go through a cadence. He had to check. He had to audible. And so you have a guy that feels a little more NFL ready than maybe some quarterbacks taken ahead of him. So I was a big fan of his game overall. Are there negatives? Sure. He doesn't drive the football like you would expect of a guy of his frame at, 6'4", something, 230, 240. The velocity over the middle is not going to be fantastic. The athleticism, I think the straight line speed, I've mentioned him running like Daniel Jones is kind of my comp to him athletically, but it's not going to be anything amazing. I think there were some times where defenses got him to make some poor reads early at Ohio State last year, but just overall, I like the body of work. I like the traits. I like the guy. I think Pittsburgh does too.
He's got a little bit of under center experience.
Yeah, I think they did some tush pushes and quarterback sneaks. I have to kind of dig into that some more. So not a ton, but it was more of a pro style system in terms of the calls at the line and coached well by Chip Kelly last year. So I think he's more not playing right away, obviously, barring something crazy happening, but more NFL ready than a lot of college quarterbacks.
I don't think he's got a lot of stuff, at least last year, on tape from middle of the field stuff. I mean, he's not like he didn't do it, but I did see some stuff in the Kansas State tape, especially in the red zone. Some nice timing over the middle type stuff for some touchdowns in the middle of the field there.
Yeah, I just thought it was good tape overall. I thought there was accuracy. The deep ball is really accurate. I thought he was a good deep ball thrower, even though maybe the arm isn't. I think the arm is good. I think just in terms of just being able to really drive, and maybe that's a mechanical thing where you can work on some of his footwork to really be able to have good weight transfer to drive the football over the middle of the field. I didn't see the RPMs and the zip on some of those throws, and some of those tight window throws could get him into trouble. But you never know what the offense will look like years from now. But just based on current construction of guys like George Pickens and DK Metcalf, big vertical outside targets, that's the type of quarterback you want thrown to them, a Will Howard type that can really be accurate, throws a very catchable deep ball. I certainly see the fit in Pittsburgh.
Reunites with Skylar Thompson. How crazy is that?
Yeah, we talked about that even before the draft. We mentioned at Kansas State, they were teammates and kind of battling for a bit, and both had some injury issues. I think maybe Howard gotten benched early in his Kansas State career. So those guys are assuming Aaron Rodgers signs, which I know is still a whole can of worms there. But you have Rodgers 1, Rudolph 2, and then it's Thompson and Howard battling again for that third spot.
He went, once again, as far as the quarterback pecking order went, he went, a little bit later than I thought, for sure. So I mean, I would imagine where you have him ranked, that's extreme value in the 6th round, as far as your own personal quarterback rankings. Who were the quarterbacks that went ahead of him?
I know Ross had it posted. Obviously, Cam Ward,
Dylan Gabriel went ahead of him. I know that.
Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, Kyle McCord, I believe, went in the 5th round ahead. Jalen Milroe. That might be the list. Basically, what quarterback didn't go later than expected besides Cam Ward and maybe Jackson Dart? They all went later. Milroe later in the 3rd. Shedeur, of course, the whole story there in the 5th round. So, yeah, I think the NFL is kind of it kind of taking my approach of either you're all in or you're all out on quarterback. Either you're our franchise guy in the 1st round, or we're not going to take you for a little while until the value just becomes too good to ignore. And that's exactly what happened for Pittsburgh.
Didn't you have a couple of teams take the Browns? Obviously took Gabriel and Shedeur. Wasn't there another team that took 2 right together?
Did another team take 2 quarterbacks? I don't know. I mean, McCord went, Milroe went to Seattle. The Vikings traded for a quarterback. They traded for Sam Howell from Seattle because of the Milroe pick, made Howell even more expendable.
Okay. I'll have some contextualizations on Howard as we get a little bit further away from draft day, looking at deep balls and looking at over the middle throws. I'm sure we'll get some full passing charts up in there. We'll look at him situationally and some timing throws and all like that. But I mean, I think overall your video on this is a first stop shop on this, right?
Yeah, that or the profile too I wrote on. I did a lot of breakdown, a lot of work on Will Howard. I'll go back and continue to do it. But after that, go watch have you watched the Gruden quarterback camp with Will Howard yet?
No, I saw it posted last night, and I have not watched that yet.
Yeah, it's about 40 minutes, so take a long lunch if you're listening. But it's really good. I mean, I've always liked the Gruden quarterback camps, and it's a really good breakdown of Howard, the person, the player, and just really informative. I watched it before the draft just to kind of get to know the guy a little bit more, and I think people will be really impressed by that interview.
All right. I thought there was who was it? No, I must be wrong there. Quinn Ewers went in the 7th to who? Miami. Curtis Rourke went to the 49ers. Cam Miller went to the Raiders. Mertz went a little bit early.
Yeah, Graham Mertz. I was a little surprised. He got a 6th round. Where did he go? I'm not even sure which
Houston.
Team. To Houston. Okay, gotcha. And then Tommy Millette went to the Raiders, but they called him a receiver. He's gonna play, I think, make a position switch there.
Okay, maybe that's what I saw. Cam Miller and Millette.
Okay, yeah. Millette, I believe he was announced as a receiver, but if not, he's making a position change.
Okay, all right. That's what threw me for a loop there.
Yeah. So there you go. So I'm really happy with the Will Howard pick. What'll happen? Who knows? But I think you're getting a guy that has potential starter ability in the 6th round. Time will tell and what the opportunity is going to be once the regular season begins. You hope Will Howard does not have to play as a rookie. Otherwise, that means some bad things have happened to Pittsburgh. But I think this guy will make some plays in the preseason.
All right. Good job on that. Once again, you were all over him earlier in this process, and I came around to him.
All right, Dave, with the first of these teams' two seventh round selections, the one they acquired in that trade down from the Chiefs at 226, and you had tweeted this out and we talked about this. The free space on the Steelers mock draft bingo card, Carson Bruner, the inside linebacker from Washington. And that name, of course, very familiar to Steeler fans. His father, Mark Bruner, former Steelers tight end, current area scout who was watching the draft back home with his son Carson, apparently in the same exact spot Mark was drafted in all those 30 some odd years ago. So Pittsburgh loves their bloodlines. They know him as well as anybody. Not a big need, but you just knew Carson Bruner was going to be a Steeler, and both had that in our mock draft.
Yeah, and I couldn't help but think, talking way back with Josh Carney when we had him on, I don't know, one of the round tables or talking Shrine Bowl, or I don't remember when exactly it was, saying you can almost guarantee I'm gonna have this guy in my final mock draft. It did feel like the free space on the bingo card when it comes to a mock draft selection there, and neither one of us are surprised there. You got the bloodline, NFL bloodlines. You got obviously the link to the Steelers. There, the inside linebacker, not a huge need for this team. But you do have some guys that you do wonder if Bruner could maybe easily beat out for. Going to easily, assuming he makes the roster, going to be easily a core 4-team special teams guy, smart enough, and you hopefully probably don't want to get in a situation where he has to play snaps as a rookie on defense. But we'll see how he develops within that realm. Might make Mark Robinson expendable. We'll have to see what happens with Cole Holcomb coming off of his injury and the price tag that they have on him. How many total inside linebackers will they keep? If they keep 5 in total, Bruner's more than definitely going to be in play there. But heady kid, a guy that's not going to cause you any problems. What, over 300 I wrote this up. I think just over 300 tackles in college, and he was just a 1-year starter last year. And last year it was a little over 100 tackles. So you kind of go back in your head and think about when Matakevich was a draft pick, and they talking about, boy, just look at all the tackles that this guy had. And obviously Matakevich never became a defensive player that warranted getting a lot of snaps, but he did become a core special teamer, and heck, is still in the league right now, or was up until this past season here. So if that's the best that you get out of Carson Bruner is 4 or 5 years in the league as a special teams guy and a special teams captain with occasional snaps on defense, hey, nothing wrong with that. And anything more out of that, he is a smart guy and can find the football, and made some plays out in space and had a couple interceptions. Anything you get more than that is just gravy. So this was a Connor Hayward easy selection.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And the special teams background is extensive with Carson Bruner. It's hundreds of special team snaps in college, 250 in 2024. What did he have last year? 82, but he was in that more prominent defensive role, as you said. So he's got a background there, can really, like I said, talked about on the pre-show before the draft Saturday, you want either the boom bust guys, the high ceiling, or the high floor guys. And Bruner probably more the latter, high floor guy, is going to give you really good special team snaps and raise the competition level in that room. Pittsburgh often carries 5 off-ball linebackers. You have 3 locked in Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Malik Harrison. And then you let probably 3 guys fight for 2 spots. So Mark Robinson, Carson Bruner, and Cole Holcomb, who's the unknown coming off the knee injury. If Holcomb is healthy, then he probably makes it. And then it comes down to Bruner or Robinson, who was in those shoes a couple years ago as a 7th round pick, trying to fight for a special teams role. But Bruner, he ran 4.58 at the combine. He had 3 interceptions last year. So there is maybe a little bit more to it than just special teams, but it's physical tape, team captain. Pittsburgh obviously knows him extremely, extremely well. So just felt like he was going to be a Steeler, and now he is.
Yeah, he is. And look, you never know how these things are going to shake out, but for a 7th round pick, got a very, very strong chance at making the roster.
Yeah, probably better than the average 7th-round selection. And Pittsburgh special teams wilted last year. I know everyone talked about their offense and the defense, and those were the headlines, but even on kicks and punts, their coverage units struggled last season. And so to kind of infuse some new guys there that can hopefully raise that. Malik Harrison as well from Baltimore has an extensive special teams background, like 1,500 snaps since he came into the NFL. He'll be a core guy. Bruner will try to do the same.
If anybody did not have Bruner in their mock draft contest in the 6th or 7th round, shame on you.
Yeah, and Dave and I did, and Dave, I got to give you a lot of credit, man. This almost rivaled what the Curtis Brown, Marcus Gilbert mock draft you did. You had 3 guys in your mock this year: Will Howard, Derek Harmon, and Carson Bruner. That is aces.
I think this is the best one I had since that year, because I think didn't I have Cortez Allen in that class?
You had a third, yeah. There was a third I just couldn't remember, but go ahead.
But anyway, I got a lot of pushback. Obviously, what we always do when we push our. That's why I only do one, because my first is usually my best. For the most part when it comes to that, and I'm very happy. Look, I had the wrong rounds on Will Howard, and for a while there, I thought I might have a chance at Dante Thornton hit, but he went a little bit early. Classic Al Davis from the grave, height, weight, speed guy with Dante Thornton. The screw to production. Just give me a guy that can run fast, and that's why he probably went a little bit earlier there. But yeah, I'm happy I hit. Heck yeah, I'm happy if I hit one. And to hit 3 of and let's face it, we only each picked 6, even though this team had 7 draft picks there. I'm pretty happy overall.
Yeah.
And it felt like Carson Bruner was a gimme in the bunch.
There you go. And with the final selection, which came right after that at 229 overall. Now, if you had gotten this one, Dave, I would have said you have some inside trading information there. I don't think anybody had this guy in their mock draft or really on their radar. Put our hands up for that one. Dante Kent, the cornerback out of Central Michigan. So Chippewa, MAC player, Pittsburgh, checking that box. Kent, that Central Michigan for several seasons, I think 5-6 years there at CMU. Slot corner last year. He's played outside before. He's got inside-outside flexibility. Also was a punt returner last year for Central Michigan. Had a big 72-yard punt return against Central Connecticut in the opener. So Pittsburgh liking the versatility, liking the special teams asset and ability. Danny Smith himself was the man talking about Kent after the pick came in, which kind of tells you where they think about where Kent can help on special teams.
Sounds like a creative player, right? I didn't know anything about. I'll be up in front and honest. I didn't know anything about Dante Kent until his name was called, and I had to kind of scramble and do some quick homework on that. I think there's 2 games up on YouTube of Central Michigan from last year. Luckily, I've got on the YouTube machine, YouTube TV. I think I got 6 more games recorded that I have to go through there. Let's see, 5'10" and a quarter, 187 pounds, a little bit older at 23.57. His birthday is in September. Seemed to be kind of feast or famine guy, where it was either could defend a pass or was getting beat deep.
Yeah, there was a graphic that I just stumbled across trying to find some good photos for him to use for the site, where I think it was like he was first in pass breakups and then second worst in big plays allowed. So it really did feel like feast or famine. As you're correct myself, I think Danny Smith was talking about the Carson Bruner pick, not the Dante Kent selection. But either way, Kent's going to help out on special teams. That's at least the intent of the goal for him. So yeah, ran well at his pro day, ran 4.38. Pittsburgh had Quentin Harris there. And so they're going to see if he can stick. Yeah, I obviously have to watch him some more. Seems to be pretty aggressive with his eyes. Had good production in terms of breakups. There was a time, I think 2-3 years ago, he had double-digit breakups in back-to-back seasons. And so you like that. Limited ball production, only 2 career interceptions. Both of those came early in his college career. He didn't have a pick over his final 3 years. So a guy that broke up more passes than took away the football. But yeah, it seems pretty feast or famine, bites on double moves. I know against Notre Dame, he got beat for a long touchdown. I think had his eyes in the backfield. So an aggressive corner that can kind of live by the sword, die by the sword defensively.
I'm looking. I'm stat book scouting here. 235 total tackles for his college career. Now he looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons there, but only 18 in 2020 overall. How many cornerbacks in this that were drafted have anywhere close to that amount of tackles coming out of college?
It's a good question. Yeah, the book on him, I know Dane Brugler's draft guide, I looked at a little bit, regards him as a good tackle. We do have a scouting report up on him. Did not have one before the draft, but our Jonathan Height trader whipped one up late last night. And so he regarded him as a good tackler. So that's going to really profile well on special teams. You better be able to tackle on the coverage units. And it sounds like Kent can.
Looks like I'm scrolling through here quickly. Ethan Robinson out of Minnesota had 196 tackles. I'm trying to find anybody on the cornerback list that can even rival the amount of tackles that Kent had coming out of college. I'm having a tough time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, he played in college for probably longer than some other corners, and so that helped, I'm sure, a little bit. But seems like he was targeted.
Huzzy out of North Carolina had 261, but he also had. He was in 2019. I mean that's one, but yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that's one of the things that pops out to me is, damn, the kid had a lot of tackles in college.
Absolutely. Was Huzzy drafted? Am I missing something on that?
I was just looking at the draft guide.
Okay.
I can't remember if he was drafted or not.
I think he went undrafted. So in terms of your question of like drafted corners, Kent might be the leader.
Right.
So we'll see. Will Pittsburgh allow him to do any return work? Will he even try kicks? He does not have a background there, but maybe Pittsburgh would attempt it because Calvin Austin, you would assume, still going to be the driver for the punt return job. I know Tomlin has historically almost never let defensive players return kicks and punts outside of Allen Rossum way back in Tomlin's first year in 2007 and a smattering of defensive players, the occasional Cam Sutton throughout. But we'll see. I imagine Kent might at least get a look there.
How about anything on Gunner?
I don't know what he did at Central Michigan. I would have to look that up. But I mean, you run 4.38, you can tackle like him. You're trying to cut your teeth. I'm sure he's going to get all the special teams reps he can handle, and that'll include Gunner work on punt coverage.
And they obviously list him as a punt returner, so he'll be in those lines to get a chance to show there. But Mike Tomlin doesn't have a history of letting defensive players do that, so that'll be interesting to watch. I'm trying to see if I can pull up.
Yeah, his punt return touchdown came late in a blowout win, like I mentioned earlier, against Central Connecticut State down the right sideline, but showed us wheels on that return if you go back and watch it.
Let's see if I can find out how many, if any, other special. I mean, if he was a gunner or anything like that, kick coverage. It doesn't look like he has any punt coverage stuff, at least not last year. Let me look at 2020.
Yeah, maybe early in his career, I'm betting.
He's got 25 on the punt coverage team in 2023 as a gunner left there. 2022 had just one on punt coverage there. 2021, he did have 46 punt coverage there as a gunner left and right. So he's got a little bit of gunner in his resume in college.
And I'm sure we'll have a lot more at the NFL come training camp. And then in 2020, he was also about 30 or so gunner reps. So there's a background there.
All right. He's gonna have to cut his teeth on special teams to make this roster.
I'm not one to usually talk about they should have taken this guy instead because that's an endless debate that doesn't really get us anywhere. I try to focus on the player, but I just can't help but notice some of the names who came off right after Dante Kent. Dan Jackson from Georgia went one pick later to Detroit, which is such a Detroit Lions pick. I had that in my 7-round mock draft, so I'll do a little victory lap on that. Hunter Wohler, I can't believe held a 232 overall. That's a guy that I would have loved to take as well. I know we're talking safety versus corner, but yeah, I did a little twinge of, could you just finish the draft with Dan Jackson or Hunter Wohler? That would have, I think, really aced this class.
All right,
Dave. So once the draft was in the books, the draft was not really over. The undrafted free agent frenzy began, and Pittsburgh signing a class of 7. And I just forgot to pull up the names here, so I'll read them off to you in a second. Pittsburgh announcing the class, and they'll probably add some rookie minicamp names here throughout the next couple of days. Still hold the rookie minicamp, I assume, 2 weekends from now, as they usually do. But the 7 undrafted free agents per the team: Rock Taylor, the wide receiver from Memphis; DJ Thomas Jones, the fullback from South Alabama. They played tight end in college. They're Pittsburgh calling him a fullback. Sebastian Castro, the defensive back out of Iowa. Dave, it was a great pull by you. You mentioned him on our preview show yesterday. Aiden Williams, the offensive lineman from Minnesota Duluth. He was a tackle and guard at college at the D2 level, probably play more guard in
That
Pittsburgh.
was a good pull by you there.
Yeah, they had interested him with the Shrine Bowl, and so that was a name that stayed on my radar. Ben Sauls, the kicker from Pitt, and so I think Pitt Panthers fans will know him well. J.J. Galbraith, a tight end from South Dakota, a guy that I was pretty high on, and then Keyshawn Williams, undersized, shifty receiver out of Indiana. That is your Steelers' 7 undrafted free agents. Dave, this is a better class than what Pittsburgh usually gives us, so I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, looks like a little bit stronger class. And what was the report on DJ Thomas Jones? $30,000 signing bonus, I think. When it comes to him.
Yeah, that was what Tom Pelissero reported. So the highest signing bonus to a non-quarterback in Steelers history. John Rice Plumlee, Arjo Clark was quick to point this out, got $35K last year. Now the signing pool bonus goes up every year, so naturally some guys will get paid more. But Thomas Jones sounds like he was the biggest prize Pittsburgh got in free agency.
I had time before bed last night to go watch at least a little bit on one of these guys, Keyshawn Williams out of Indiana, the wide receiver. There's a nice kind of clip of at least his strong points there. They used him a lot in the slot. They used him a lot in the screen game. You see a lot of like smoke and tunnel screens with him. You see some stuff over the middle, some catches, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 yards down the field with him. You see one nice contested catch, I think, on the sideline against Michigan there. Very pinballish after the catch. He one thing that stuck out to me was his ability to now he is a bit of a body catcher, so that stuck out to me, but he's quick to get the ball tucked away and start running off of it due to his size. He's very pinballish. But he seems to keep his balance. In other words, he'll get hit, he'll go a different direction, but he'll gain a couple extra yards that way there. So should be, and I think he's got a little bit of punt return skills in his resume as well too. So he might be another one that gets a couple of chances at maybe some return duties in there. But he was the only one of this undrafted list that I went and kind of was able to devour a little bit of tape on.
Yeah, he was a Wake Forest guy. His first 4 years, transferred to Indiana for 2024, part of that really good Hoosiers team. 39 catches for 448 yards, 5 touchdowns, and did some kicks throughout his career. So nothing prolific in terms of production, but there is a background there, a little bit on punts as well. And so I'm sure he'll be in those return drills come training camp.
I mentioned Castro ahead of the draft and all like that, thinking they're probably going to go undrafted, but it wouldn't be a bad guy to get there. A very physical, a little bit undersized, not the most athletic dude, but he's not afraid to hit. I'll tell you that. So do I think he's going to be a guy that's going to threaten the 53-man roster? No, but he could potentially be a practice squad guy for sure. Tell me more about Aiden Williams.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write the report on him, or Jim Hester did, so it's just great to have a report on a Minnesota Duluth offensive lineman. He's Anchorage, Alaska, played tackle, played, I think, some guard as well, but sub 33-inch arms probably will kick him inside. Let me see what the actual conclusion of our report was on Aiden Williams. Let me pull it up here. But Pittsburgh showed Williams had said Pittsburgh had showed more interest in him at the Shrine Bowl, I should say. So he was there. So that's why these All-Star games are really important for these small school guys to really get a look against that higher level of competition and really kind of get some awareness out there. But he says, quote, our report does, Williams has grown leaps and bounds since playing tight end and really worked on his pass protection technique in the 2 years he's been a starter at tackle. There is still a lot that he needs to learn and improve upon, but he definitely can be a draft and stash type of player and an offensive line coach would love to work with. He's very smart, works hard, adapts quickly, has a nasty mentality, and has athletic appeal to show off a promising upside of a future payoff. So pretty good report on him. So yeah, former tight end, bulked up to play offensive line, had some good testing numbers overall at his pro day, and has some size, at least 6'0", 314. So something to work with Aiden Williams.
All right, educate me on J.J. Galbraith.
Yeah, I can't believe Galbraith's a Steeler. This is why we do our small school week. He was one of my profiles. I had no intention to write about him. I was going to do the running back at South Dakota. Then Galbraith kind of popped on tape. And I was like, who is this guy making these great plays? So athletic move tight end, was an FCS All-American last year despite missing a bunch of time with a shoulder injury. He tracks the ball well. He moves well. He's a really fluid route runner. He's just good after the catch. He kind of, I think they changed offensive coordinators there that kind of really turned the light on for him. He was versatile. He gives effort as a blocker, not going to be a great blocker, but he was asked to do some of that in South Dakota's offense and had some great testing. He had a 6.82 3-cone, which might have been, I think, was the best 3-cone time of any tight end in the draft. Just flat out first round guy, 7th round guy, undrafted free agent. That might have been the best 3-cone time. So different type of tight end than Pittsburgh typically brings in, but a really good athlete that kind of feels like a bigger receiver and a guy that can kind of split out and run down the seam.
All right. Which one of these guys are you most excited to see show up on this list? Galbraith?
Yeah, because I just who the heck expected our report from way back when to show up in Pittsburgh. I had a draftable grade on JJ Galbraith. I know it's lower level competition, but FCS has put out some good tight ends and Tucker Kraft and Dallas Goedert. I mean, there's a handful of names you can cite right now. So I'm not saying he'll be that guy, but don't knock the level of competition too much. Rock Taylor's interesting too. He's got some size. He had success at Memphis. So I want to dig into his tape some more. But Pittsburgh always finds a way to go to Memphis. Always kind of those old Memphis ties from the Randy Fichtner days. Always find one of those Tigers to bring in.
All right, we had profiles already on Aiden Williams, Sebastian Castro, Ben Sauls, J.J. Galbraith. Do we have anybody else?
No, those are the 4. So we got to do ones on Taylor, Thomas Jones, and Williams. We'll get those up. On Sauls, the lefty kicker. I'm sure people from the area will know him well watching the Panthers game last year. He had a big 2024 season, went 6 of 7 on field goals of 50 plus. I think he had 57, 58 being his long, really just exploded. Was not a 50-yard plus guy earlier in his Panthers career, but everything kind of changed last year. So I liked him. I thought he was a guy that could have been considered to be one of those kickers drafted. He's dealt with adverse conditions. Go watch that Sun Bowl against UCLA in 2022, went 5 of 5 in some really hellacious wins, including the game-winning 47-yarder, I should say, to beat the Bruins. So interesting guy. Had some difficulty earlier in his career, but bounced back and had a really, really strong 2025 or 2024, I should say. So you don't see the lefty kicker too often, but he'll be in Pittsburgh. I was surprised. I thought he would get a better chance somewhere else to maybe go compete for a job somewhere. So I'm happy he's with the Steelers.
Okay. And we expect, let's see, that should put the roster technically at 90, I think. Had 76 under contract, had 7 draft picks, had 7 undrafted free agents reported. Now, the Steelers got a roster exemption for international for Julius Welshoff. I am counting him in those 90, but they have technically, I think, the ability to sign one more or add one more to this list. Now, when we get to Monday or Tuesday, it'll be interesting to see is Cordell Patterson out the door? Is Dean Lowry out the door? Or any of these reserve future guys, get dropped at this situation here? But I think I have them at 90 right now, pending any other moves. So they've got the roster spot open. We'll see what happens, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. As we've talked, we probably expect this team to maybe add a veteran or 2, unrestricted free agent unsigned after Monday, 4:00. So keep an eye out on that. But I think we have it at 90, kind of officially unofficial right now.
And Rodgers certainly could be that 91st, which Pittsburgh, as you said, can go over the way they did last year with Welshoff being the exemption. What other roster needs do you see Pittsburgh needing to address here? I think offensive tackles, when we've talked about, to go get another veteran in the mix.
Yeah, I think obviously you can add a tackle. Be interesting to see. Maybe there's another veteran out there, wide receiver that they add to the room just as a body to help try to see what else is out there. I think that's a possibility. Uh, maybe a safety, another safety. You know,
Mhm. Were you what were your feelings on the team not drafting a receiver? And I thought they would, given all the work that Zach Ghazzani did, and they did not ultimately go that route. How do you feel about that?
I think if the opportunity presented itself for a couple of players, a couple of those guys, the Thornton, maybe a Horton, uh, I think it would have had to been the right guy. So I'm not overly shocked. I did mock obviously one to them, and look, there was a lot of talk about us and others about the plausibility and probability of this team trading George Pickens. They obviously did not, and at this point, that especially once you got out of the second day of the draft, uh, nothing's going to happen there.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you've got you got a good group of wide receivers to work with at this point.
I'm not mad they passed on receiver. Now, if there were a couple guys they would have taken, I would have been okay with. Dante Thornton, as you said, I am I've talked about, but this was a bad receiver class overall, and Pittsburgh has a group set to win now in 2025 with Pickens and Metcalf and Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson and Skoranek on special teams, and you throw Fryermuth and the run heaviness nature of this offense. There was not going to be a role for a rookie receiver really at all unless a bunch of injuries piled up. So I know Roman Wilson's an unknown, and I know that Pickens and Austin are free agents to be after this year. But I was okay with passing on receiver. The class didn't warrant it, and the need did not warrant it.
And then obviously when you look at this, I mean, not part of the draft class officially, but you look at tech, however you want to look at it, DK Metcalf is your second round pick this year. And especially when you look at this year's draft class, how were you going to find an upgrade in the second round at wide receiver, a better player than DK Metcalf at the position?
No, you are not. So that is really good perspective that should be included when you think about this draft class. And also the rookies who barely played last year that you'll get in 2025, a Troy Fautanu, a Roman Wilson, a Logan Lee, hopefully a Ryan Watts based on the health of his neck injury. So you kind of factor that in a little bit as well about the new talent that can hopefully help you in 2025.
Agreed.
So, Dave, what are your final thoughts on this draft class overall? I don't know if you're big into grades or not, but just kind of your overall takeaways. You happy with it? Do you like it better than Omar Khan's other two classes? What are your overall thoughts?
I am. Look, we both thought that all along that it was going to be a defensive lineman first, right? I mean, realistically, the way coming out of what Art Rooney had to say and the Blues Clues and everything that we thought. I mean, I don't know how you can't be happy with the Derek Harmon in that situation. I never fell for any of the Shedeur Sanders stuff. Never really thought maybe Dart was a really realistic guy early on in this draft. We knew running back was going to be a position that this team was going to draft. And depending on whether or not they got a second round pick back or not, that pick was probably going to be in a third or fourth round. When you look at the player that they got in Caleb Johnson, the explosiveness, everything that we kind of talked about that he brings to this team, based on our talk on Friday or on Saturday there. Uh, I don't see how you can't like that one. So I think a little bit where the curveball came was with Sawyer in the fourth round. I understand. I want to watch more on him. They double dipped in the draft with Yahya Black, and it's understandable why, especially with what was on the table there. And then heck, you got a quarterback a couple rounds later than what I thought. We were both on board with Will Howard, so I don't see how you don't like that, especially the value of that pick. Bruner was a free space on the board. I'm along with you. I think you probably could have went a different direction with your last pick in the draft, but it's your last pick in the draft. I'm not big on grades right out of shoot here, but I would easily give it a B plus.
Yeah, it's kind of my thought too. Still want to dig into the tape a little bit more. Am I as excited? Just trying to think back, and it's always tough to compare to other classes because now you're a bit clouded by how those classes have done on the field. But I think there was more excitement about the 2023 and 2024 classes, all while understanding Pittsburgh had more draft capital than had a second round pick. In 2023, they had 2 second round picks for Porter Jr. and Benz. You just had more bites at the apple, higher selections. Your perspective of DK Metcalf is kind of your second round pick is certainly important. I think this class is a little
If you
more.
factor that in, you're probably an A minus. Then, if you want to be realistic about it and say, okay, DK Metcalf's part of this class, well then I would go from a B plus to an A minus.
Sure, because I'll take DK Metcalf over a second round pick any day of the week for a guy that they signed to a long term deal as well, not just the 1 year rental of how long will you have this guy here for. He's in Pittsburgh for the long haul. So I think the class is a little more higher floor, lower ceiling than maybe the other ones, but it was focused on run defense. It was focused on getting better in the trenches. I can appreciate the investment there, and I don't really see a bad pick. I think Yahya Black probably my least favorite one of the lot, but if that's the worst thing you can say about it of a 5th round pick, then I think you're doing okay.
Man, I can't get away from Mel Kiper just being beside himself all weekend here, especially when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, and then off of that, the Steelers in the quarterback position. He even ranted what the Steelers must feel really good about their chances. He was irate. Man, he took this personal with the Shedeur Sanders thing. He goes, the Steelers must really feel good about their chances of signing Aaron Rodgers. That's the only explanation for their approach of the 2025 draft. And they don't land Rodgers or pull some other magic at quarterback. Coach Mike Tomlin's 18-year streak of going at least 500 could end. Mason Rudolph is the current starter, yet Pittsburgh added only Will Howard at the position in round 6. He's a backup in the NFL instead of getting a quarterback they can win games with right now in round 1. The Steelers went defensive tackle. And he goes on, don't get me wrong, Derek Harmon, perfect for this defense, yada, yada. I mean, he even mocked Derek Harmon a couple of times to the Steelers throughout this process there. He is adamant that the Steelers should have took Shedeur Sanders in round 1, and even in round 3, and I suppose probably in round 4. And claiming that if they don't get Rodgers, that a guy like Sanders would have won them games this season, and maybe potentially streak of 500, can over 500 continues. I think he's just off his rocker here.
Dave, as the kids call, Mel Kiper's crashing out. Yeah, that was, I almost felt like a bit. I don't know if that was being encouraged to continue to talk it up and gain the attention for it for people like us to talk about it. I don't know. But, I'm not going to sit there and defend all of Pittsburgh's quarterback movements this offseason. It's been messy and a lot of angst and felt pretty rudderless and directionless in a lot of ways. But clearly, the NFL did not like Shedeur Sanders as much as the media thought the NFL liked Shedeur Sanders. So that's reflected in falling all the way to 144, which nobody predicted. So, Mel Kiper can have his opinion. We'll see. Sanders in Cleveland will be interesting. It's what were some of the good responses you got on the nicknames of the quarterback room when you tweeted that out yesterday? A quarterback room of Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and Deshaun Watson. Somebody said the flop 5, which made me laugh. That was my favorite, I think, of the other replies I saw.
Am I allowed to say the one that tickled me the most?
Yeah, maybe.
The Cleveland Steamers.
All right. That's honestly better than I didn't know where you're going to go with that one. So that's a good one. Yeah.
Do you know what Cleveland?
That's not. All right.
Okay. I'm making sure you're street smart here. You understand what that means.
All right, Dave. Let's power through that. But I'm not going to address it. Let's go. Final thoughts here with Pittsburgh. So yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm not. Again, I don't want to sound critical, but I don't want to sit there and say that every pick's going to be amazing. Every pick's going to be awesome. There are no warts, no concerns. I think with every draft class, there's good and bad. I like the intent. I like the focus. Do I think it's a home run draft? Probably not, but you also understand they didn't have the draft capital they normally have when they go into draft weekend.
Here's the thing. You come out with 7 players, and we both agreed this team could use 7 picks this year instead of 6. I think there's 2 that you kind of wonder whether or not, at least barring injury and where we sit right now, whether or not they'll make the roster. And that would be Yahya Black and Dante Kent.
Yeah, I mean, Bruner will have to fight for a spot too. There's no guarantee if he goes on practice squad. That's not going to be surprising to anybody. I mean, heck, even Will Howard's going to have to earn his spot. I mean, Pittsburgh likes its steps. Kyle Thompson has NFL experience. It's going to naturally give him a leg up. So, any 6th, 7th round picks always going to have to fight for their job.
Okay. That's where we're at. Once again, there's a lot. This is the best time of year right now because you have exactly 7 players. Well, I mean, you got the undrafted too. You got 14 players that you can exclusively start drilling down deeper into film on, and not 300, and not even 100. So this to me is the most exciting part of the year when it comes to draft class, because you've got a smaller section of guys that you can go learn a lot more about right now. And I intend on doing just that over the course of the next 10 days.
Me too. All the speculation about who they could draft, which are endless possibilities, is over. We're focused on the class itself, can really talk about these specific names, and you're still really happy with the first round pick, which feels like forever ago. Draft weekend is such a crazy time, but to get there, Carmen at 21, the guy we talked about since January day, really felt like the board broke perfectly for Pitt. I think the board broke well in a lot of ways. To get Johnson in the 3rd, to get Howard in the 6th, to get Harmon in the 1st round. That's all really, really good value.
Coming out at this point right now, I feel real comfortable talking about Harmon and Caleb Johnson. I'll obviously watch more film on those guys. I feel real good about the selection of tape that I've watched of Will Howard to this point. I felt like I knew Carson Bruner pretty good ahead of the draft as well too, thanks to the pre-draft process, and just knowing already a little bit about him in Washington and all like that. Jack Sawyer, I'm going to spend a lot of time on in the next several hours, and Yahya Black is another one I'm going to spend a lot of time on, and I got a lot of Dante Kent TV tape I can watch.
You and me both. All right, Dave, any final thoughts? Any emails that were interesting you want to get to? Probably resume more of the emails for the Monday show, kind of get back into our rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we'll keep an eye on for the rookie tryout guys who all will start getting invited to camp. I've yet to hear anybody that has been officially invited to Steelers training camp. I know there's some names floating around for other teams, but I'm sure we'll start hearing those names pretty soon.
All right, let me throw out a couple of emails real quick. Daniel McKelvey writes in, thanks for the yeoman's work you do every day to keep us informed. Best in the business. Just a quick thought. When the Steelers chose Will Howard in the draft, it reminded me of another time we picked a 6'3", 6'4" pocket passer in the last rounds of the draft with the hint of maybe this guy could be it as we look for our long-term solution at quarterback. Brian St. Pierre, he writes, he's going way back. Given the loaded nature of the position in next year's draft, is it too much to hope that history repeats itself if we somehow land at the 11th spot next year, either through record or a trade? I think we'll have our answer, he says. Also, how should I read into the fact that we didn't draft a wide receiver in regards to the Pickens solution? All right, it's easier to take Dan's question. Second part of the question first, and that is, look, they didn't trade. By the time they didn't trade him at the end of the day 2, that told you everything I think that you needed to know. Pickens is going to be on this team. They obviously didn't draft a wide receiver at that point moving forward there. Maybe they were just looking at some of these wide receivers just in case they got a great trade. They were not going to trade Pickens for a 4th round pick. They were probably holding out saying if we deal Pickens at all, it's going to have to be something that really moves you, a 2nd round pick and maybe something else or what have you. But the fact that they did not move Pickens, especially by the end of the second day, I think tells you all you need to know.
Agreed. Like I said, it had to be a offer you can't refuse to trade away Pickens, knowing you're trying to make this offense the best it can be, maximize your window to win now, at least in Pittsburgh's mind, what they believe is the window to win now. In a weak receiver class, when you just had the issues of last year, where you had Pickens as your number one and not much else to complement. You want to do the same song and dance of Metcalf as your number one, and then you wonder, okay, what's opposite of him to either take attention away or take advantage of all the attention that Metcalf would see. So my preference was to keep George Pickens, unless you just got an offer that was just stupid good. I assume that did not happen. So no issues with Pittsburgh holding on to Pickens, and no issues passing on receiver. Like I said earlier, bad class, wasn't a big need. I'm okay with punting.
All right. Now about Will Howard being this year's Brian St. Pierre and thus giving way to a top quarterback next year. That's totally plausible at this point. I mean, we're going to have to see, obviously how the quarterback position and depth chart shakes out the rest of this offseason, and what kind of season the Steelers have, what the quarterback class looks like coming out of college next year. There's a lot of variables that I don't even want to touch just yet when it comes to there. But at least they've got a quarterback that, I think, it's reasonable to think that maybe you got a backup here, and maybe a backup even better than Brian St. Pierre was a couple of years ago, several years ago.
One past fame of St. Pierre. Yeah, I mean, I didn't totally follow the question. Is it to say to go from St. Pierre to then you draft the quarterback next year? Is that kind of the
basically he's saying it could we see history repeat itself? They took a Brian St. Pierre and then that was 2003.
Yeah,
right?
I think okay. So that's what he's saying. Okay, 1 year you take a late round quarterback, big pocket passer, then you go get the first round guy next year. Okay, I get the framing now. Yeah, I mean, I certainly Will Howard's not preventing you from drafting a quarterback next year, assuming that Howard doesn't play at all this year. Pittsburgh will still be very much in play to find their long term solution.
All right, one more here from John Caldarelli. David Alex, been a Steeler fan for over 50 years and longtime listener with Aliquippa roots. Now back with this email. There are many moving parts to this draft, fueled by major free agent positional losses, quarterbacks, offensive line, running back, pending final contract years with TJ and Pickens, and most importantly, a 5-game season ending losing streak with gut-wrenching loss to the Ravens. That playoff loss was embarrassing and prompted Mr. Rooney to simply say the obvious. We need to stop the run. He says this draft seems complex, but it is actually quite simple, he says. Stop the run and run the ball. A Steeler creed, he writes. We will pick 2 defensive linemen, one with the first pick. A running back will soon follow, perhaps in a newly acquired second-round pick. All other picks to help fill quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, and offensive line positions. He says this draft will prioritize stopping the run and running the ball, back to basics, physical, smart, trench football. He wrote this on Friday, April the 18th. So he's pretty close to being on point, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think that sums it up all. Pittsburgh's goals were clear to get stronger in the trenches defensively, to make some real investments and inroads there the way they did offensively. I think that was really important. It clearly was a focus, and to then get a running back and hope this young offensive line that you just invested in the previous 2 drafts coalesces and develops, and that's how Pittsburgh wants to win.
All right, we'll take one more from Antonio Soares Jr. back in here. I'm a very big fan of the Derek Harmon pick. Thrilled we did not succumb to press pressure. Say that real quick. Press pressure of taking a quarterback just because. Harmon was the absolute right pick, he says. Now for our pick at 83, I have finally and completely warmed up to the idea of Will Howard. I don't know. I guess he wrote this 2 days. He wrote this on Friday too at 9:16 a.m. He was on board of Will Howard at 83. He says, I would have loved a scenario where we get another top 100 pick and take a quarterback and a running back, but not sure that will happen. If Howard is there at 83, would he be your pick? If not, who would you take ahead of them? Obviously, this is after the fact there. I'll say this, Antonio, you got Will Howard at not 83, but you got Will Howard at 185, 102 picks away from that. So I would imagine Antonio's pretty happy with that. And the fact that this team got a running back in Caleb Johnson at 83.
Yeah, I thought Howard would have been that third, fourth round type of guy. And these quarterbacks really spread themselves out and often 1 or 2 camps early or pretty late. And so to get Howard in the 6th round is, to me, just super exciting. So I was really happy about that.
All right. That's all kind of the relevant stuff we got about right now. I imagine the email machine will start filling up for the Monday show tomorrow morning. Alex, anything else coming through that we need to talk about?
No, I think we have everything covered. Should be a pretty slower day, and we'll do some more research, watch some more tape, write some more articles, and get back after it on Monday.
Yeah, and in case you're curious, we're going to start niching down into some of this. We'll have reports about Jack Sawyer as a pass rusher, Jack Sawyer against the run, film rooms. We'll have Yahya Black. The same thing, obviously more detailed stuff about Harmon and Caleb. I'm going to do some contextualizations, play-by-play throughout this, probably going forward here. I hope to learn more about Sawyer and Yahya Black here in the next 24, 48 hours, be able to talk a little bit more educated on both those guys. So look, we got a class now. We got some undrafted guys. We'll start rolling out some of the rookie mini camp invites as some of those come in here. So we've got our hands full. Just because the draft is over doesn't mean content will stop moving forward here. So Alex, great job to you throughout the free draft process. Thanks to our guys as well, too. Amazing work. So we'll get me and you back after this on Monday. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do, want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button or hit the ad-free button and follow directions that way. So until Monday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.